I started to get sick with gastro issues, and I was an athlete at the time. And so one day I could go out the door and run 8 miles and have an amazing run. And the next day like literally wouldn't be able to walk up the stairs. And I was like, something is happening to my body. I started bruising everywhere. My belly would get 7, 8 months pregnant, like not a little distended, the entire thing would swell.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Lee Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this week's fascinating conversation, I sit down with Courtney Jacobs to delve into the profound connection between the brain, nervous system, and gut health. We explore how imbalances in the brain and nervous system can impact the gut, potentially leading to significant health challenges. Courtney shares her expertise and practical strategies for addressing these issues holistically. Stay tuned for a deep dive into how supporting the brain and nervous system can transform your gut health and overall well-being. Courtney Jacobs, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And to get the show on the road, Courtney, would you mind giving the audience an overview of your background, including your own health challenges and also your professional background as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a functional nutritionist. I help people put chronic health conditions into remission. I came to this field because I got chronically sick, and I was sick for 8 years, and Western medicine was not able to help me. I had 4 conditions that I was told would be lifelong. Their option was medication. And when that didn't work, they had more medication. And let's see. Then once I got into remission, I don't have any of those conditions anymore, which is a miracle. I flew myself around. I'm in the United States. I flew myself around the country to natural practitioners who help bring my body into remission. Through that process, when that happened, I was doing incessant research. And what I realized is most conditions you can put into remission, but doctors literally don't know how. Now, I'm not saying doctors are not a good solution, because there are a lot of good ones. But to find somebody who can actually find the root of what's causing your symptom or condition and address that and actually get the body to work properly is a miracle. So when that happened, I knew I had to give this gift to the world. So that's how I ended up in this field. Then much of what we're going to be talking about today is limbic system impairment. And what that looked like in my process is I was going through the natural health world, and I made it to about 60% remission. I went through functional nutrition school. I was fully educated in it. And at 60%, I actually thought I was there. I called that like almost remission. And what I realized is I had a Band-Aid diet that eliminated symptoms, but I felt like I had to hop on one leg and twist the plate like this. And if I wore blue and I didn't do anything different, my symptoms would be down. But if anything was off, I could have symptoms. And at that time, I had insane amount of food intolerances still. So when I was very sick, I got down to about 6 foods. I could only eat about 6 foods. When I was at 60% remission, I still couldn't tolerate a supplement. So I had violent responses to supplements. Like, just for example, I ended up in the ER from vitamin D. But I was functioning and I was working and I was living and I had my life back. And I would tell you, because of my functional training, that because of oxalates and because of lectins, and here's what's going on here, and here are the reasons why my body is in this state. And I was actually doing really well. I was thriving. I had moved to a part of the country where it has winter and half the year is gray. And for 3 years in a row, I had seasonal depression. And I was doing really well in the summer and I was rolling into fall. And I thought there has to be a natural solution to not dumping this winter. What can I do to not dump this winter? So I found a holistic psychiatrist who was in a different state, and I sent her my book of paperwork. And
Mm,
at the time, I had still food intolerances. I couldn't tolerate supplements. I had light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, um, and a host of other symptoms that I can get into. Um, so I went to her to not get seasonal depression. I was
mm,
like, what can I do? And she read my case and she said, you have limbic system impairment. And I said, what is that? She
mm,
said, your brain is stuck in a state of fight or flight, constantly releasing cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. So even though you're on the perfect diet, the tight junctions of your gut literally cannot seal because you're in fight or flight.
mm,
As soon as she said, I'm in fight or flight, I was like, oh yeah, I totally am. And then I got exposed to limbic work. And what happened from that point was literally unbelievable. If you would have given me money and said, I'll bet you this much money that your body's going to make it all the way to remission and you're not going to do anything different but limbic work, like brain retraining,
mm,
I would have told you that's physically not possible because I'd already been to school. Like I could tell you the things that were the matter with my brain, but I jumped into limbic work. And so that's what we'll be talking
mm,
about today is how limbic system impairment was actually impeding my gut's ability to heal.
mm,
And find that this is the case in my practice with 70% of the people that come, there's some form of limbic system impairment going on.
mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, the first thing is, what you said at the beginning about, you're going to see doctors and they're not really looking to treat the root cause, they're looking to treat the symptom is something that I've heard from people coming to me time after time after time after time. And it's a bit different in the UK. So to be a doctor in the UK, it either means you're a medical doctor or you've got a PhD. No one else is considered a doctor. I know it's a bit different in the US. Like you've got doctor of naturopathy or osteopathy or nutrition or whatever, but it's different. It's a bit different in the UK. So when we talk about doctors, we're talking medical doctors. But yeah, the amount of times I've had someone come to me and they say, oh, I've got this problem, and the doctor's told me there's absolutely nothing you can do to overcome it. Do you think you can help? And, every time I say something similar, I say, look, what I can help you do is optimize your health. And my belief is health and disease can't live in the same body, right? So, lots of people might contact me and say, oh, have you helped someone with this before, right? And a lot of the time, the answer is no. But does that mean I can help them or not? Well, again, if I know how to get people healthy, right, then generally the condition no longer exists. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The other thing, if you're comfortable, could you share, because you mentioned autoimmunity, could you maybe share what autoimmune conditions you did have?
Oh, yeah. So I didn't have autoimmunity myself.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
right.
I I reacted to all autoimmune foods. My body reacted in an autoimmune way. So microneedling, if you get microneedling to the skin and you have an autoimmune condition, you get scarring all over your face. I got that. Um, I had severe gastrointestinal issues. I had
Mm-hmm.
SIBO. I had mold toxicity. So mold was a part of my perfect storm.
Mm,
So how I got sick was I was going through a divorce. I was marathon training, running a business, and went through, and lived in a place with mold. So
mm,
the stress combined with the mold, and I now know that I'm gene positive for CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So my body couldn't process the mycotoxins well. I started to get sick with gastro issues, and I was an athlete at the time. And so one day I could go out the door and run 8 miles and have an amazing run. And the next day like literally wouldn't be able to walk up the stairs.
Mm,
And I was like, something is happening to my body. I started bruising everywhere. My belly would get 7, 8 months pregnant, like
mm,
not a little distended, the entire thing would swell. I went to the GI, and this was years ago, and I was started doing research, and I said, I think I have this thing called leaky gut. And he said, that's actually a theory. It's not a real thing. And everybody gets gas and bloating. And I was like, I don't think you understand. I don't
mm,
think you understand what's happening to me.
mm,
Um, so it started with food intolerances and fatigue issues. I then got tinnitus, joint pain. I started getting histamine issues. I started reacting to lectins, oxalates, salicylates. I had incontinence, like constant urinary issues. A lot of mine presented with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, panic attacks. And as in the beginning, it was so overwhelming, the emotional stuff. But then as I started to study and research, I realized it wasn't me, it was my body.
mm,
And so that gave me a little bit of space from the mental health conditions. But the mental health stuff was um, horrific, I would
mm,
say. I would say to watch your brain and body be hijacked. I got migraines. And then the food intolerances, there was a point where I started reacting to water. I remember I was out in a public place once and I reacted to water, and then I just like started sobbing because I was like, I can't even have water. Like, how am I going to live in this world? Um, I started to get light and sound sensitivity. I started to become sensitive to things around me, so I couldn't wear earrings anymore. My world just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Basically, my entire system was becoming hypersensitive to everything.
mm,
And these things happened at different points in the journey. And it almost is, I should actually sit and write a list. It's hard for me to remember all of the little things. A lot of times I don't even remember some of the symptoms till I'm sitting with a client and they're like, "Oh, I have this crazy thing happening." And I think, "Oh, I literally went through that. I know about that. You're not
mm,
crazy." But I don't even remember because once you get well, and I love what you said about when you bring health to a body, there cannot be disease. I see that for myself in my practice. And then once there is health, these things seem a world away, like a
mm,
movie. And so if there's anybody who's really struggling in their body, there is so much hope
mm,
that I always repeated the mantra in my head, others recover, so can I.
mm,
Because what I felt like is my condition was so much worse than everybody else's because they couldn't get a one autoimmune diagnosis, or they couldn't get, like, nobody could actually pinpoint why my body was breaking down. So I had a story that mine was so much worse than other people. I would go to doctors or practitioners and they would just look at me like, uh, I don't know, and that was scary, but I just kept writing. If others recover, so can I. If
mm,
others recover, so can I. And yeah, it did.
mm. Yeah, something that you mentioned you went to see or you worked with someone in a different state. Wasn't Colorado by any chance, was it?
No. Uh-uh.
Okay. It's just I've had a few people on the podcast from Colorado that do something similar from what you was describing, and I just wondered if it might be one of those guys, but no, it wasn't. Okay,
Uh-uh.
awesome. So apart from all those symptoms, you were fine, right?
uh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a long list. That's a long list of symptoms that you had. I know you said they kind of might have happened at different times, but Yeah, I mean, I've had a few clients that have had a list like that, but, in the last 28 years, probably one or two that have had a symptom list that kind of is as long as yours. So that's pretty significant. You've mentioned a little bit about limbic impairment syndrome and how that affects the tight junctions in the gut lining. Is there any other ways in which limbic impairment system impairment syndrome affects gut health? When 35-year-old Amanda first scheduled to see me, she'd been suffering for 19 years from severe IBS, diarrhea, and fecal incontinence, along with abdominal pain and bloating. Her condition had not only made life uncomfortable for Amanda, but very inconvenient as she had to walk 2 hours to work every day along a route that had public toilets, and she'd never been on holiday as an adult because of her condition. The only advice that several doctors and specialists had given Amanda was to take Imodium, and when she first saw me, she was taking 5 Imodium a day and wasn't getting any better. To help Amanda, I ran tests to find out what foods were right for her metabolic type, to see which foods she was sensitive to, and to assess her gut microbiome. Tests showed that Amanda had several food sensitivities and a parasite infection. Over the coming weeks, I coached Amanda to eat right of her type and to replace the foods she was sensitive to, and a protocol to deal with her parasite infection. And after 3 months, Amanda was IBS free, and she also reported her skin was much improved and she had lost weight. And she booked a holiday for her and her husband to New York, as they'd never been on a proper honeymoon because of her IBS. And if you're suffering like Amanda was, and you want to get to the root cause of your problem, you can arrange a consultation with me at www.bodycheck.co.uk. And if we're a good fit, I could help you achieve the same kind of results as Amanda. Now, back to the podcast.
Yeah. So if anybody's been doing all of the right things, if you're on a good gut healing protocol, and now that's tricky in and of itself, because I've had many people come to me from a gut healing protocol, but they weren't actually on something strong enough to help them. And a little bit of how I practice now is I used to work with 40 different diets. And what that means is each body is bio-individual and each condition needs different set of help and support. I used to start with smaller routes to Rome, easier routes to Rome. I've found over the last 5 to 8 years, people are getting sicker than they were before. And so I literally say, we're doing the gut healing protocol on steroids. Like, we are just going all to the wall because I want to pull out anything that could be affecting the gut. So when you start hearing about limbic system impairment, and if anybody feels that their body's in fight or flight, the more they start researching it, they'll think, this is me. Oh, yes. And then if you look into a lot of limbic programs, they will say, you actually don't need to worry about healing the gut, because once your brain's online, the gut will heal. And I actually don't find that to be the case. That could possibly be the case if somebody's body is just starting the process of breaking down. What I found to fully bring somebody's body into a remission state is you have to work on gut healing, detoxing, hormones, lifestyle, stress, and the brain. So you write sleep, circadian rhythm, like you have to look at their entire picture. And when you put all of these pieces together, you get exactly what you talked about: health where disease can't live. So how does limbic system impairment affect the gut? This part of the brain in the front is our neocortex. This is our rational thinking part of the brain. Many people who have limbic system impairment had stressful childhoods, childhood trauma. They had possibly been through a trauma. Some of them, their chronic health condition has been the traumatic experience. Mold can flip the brain into limbic system impairment. A virus like Lyme or other viruses can flip the brain. So, okay. So what's going on? Our limbic system is our brainstem. That's right here. This is our neocortex right here. This is our calm thinking brain. It's literally offline. So the only thing running the show is the limbic system. So it's constant fight or flight. That cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine causes systemic inflammation. So the body's not in a place that it can heal.
Mm,
Those stress chemicals affect our microbiota. So we can't really build a robust microbiome. Um, how I work on gut healing protocols is a lot of times practitioners try to go in and either just kill off what's there. So I had SIBO. Um, and it was years ago when SIBO was just starting. And there's a SIBO clinic in Portland, Oregon that Allison Seebecker
mhm,
has. And she's very well known. And I was like, I'm going to the best, right? And I went, and while they helped me, there was constant killing, like killing protocols of herbals and different things.
mm,
And it just kept reoccurring, kept reoccurring, kept reoccurring. Well, what was going on? Why would this not go away 6 years later? Right. I was
mm,
doing all of the things that they said. So, one of the reasons why it was not coming back is that my ecosystem was not strong enough to keep it at bay.
mm,
Part of the reason for that was limbic system impairment. So at the very end, so I had reoccurring SIBO. I was sick for 8 years. I had reoccurring SIBO for 6 years. At the end, the only thing I changed was limbic system impairment and re-inoculating my gut.
mm,
My body kicked SIBO out on its own. Now, if somebody has a very active SIBO situation going on, you might need to knock it down with herbals. So I'm not saying you can just go brain retrain and kick out high levels of SIBO. What I'm saying is if the brain is offline and you are flooded with stress chemicals, you can't rebuild your ecosystem
mm,
to a proper way to actually keep it robust, to keep that SIBO gone, right? Or
mm,
SIFO. Either. It's the same situation. So that's one of the reasons. Um, when you start brainer training, there are many different things. In the beginning, I start with top down training. That's from the brain down to the body because the brain is in such fight or flight. When I was sick, I started studying and researching, and thank God I did, right? Because I figured out what I had, things that were going on with my body when doctors didn't know. But it had become my hobby. It had become my obsession, right? And I didn't think it was a negative thing. I actually enjoyed learning about it. I thought it was fun. I didn't know that my incessant researching was actually making me sicker.
mm,
So when I started limbic system training, they said, you are not allowed to research or talk about your condition anymore. And I thought, uh, okay. Um, and at the time, I will tell you, it sounded like woo woo. Like it sounded totally crazy.
mm,
And I can remember I hired a coach and I like went into this program and I told my best friend and my mom, I said, what do I have to lose? This sounds seriously insane. Like I don't think because she was like, "Oh, your light sensitivity can go away and the overstimulation and the sound sensitivity and your food intolerances and you know, I just thought, well, if I don't get seasonal depression, I'll be happy. Like I'm just going after this one condition and if that improves, whatever. And I told them, at least this protocol won't hurt me.
mm,
Half of protocols that I tried with practitioners made me worse because I reacted to everything. They
mm,
would try and then their supplement would send me, would not work. And so I thought, well, at least this can't hurt me. And so I jumped into the practice and they said, okay, you can't research or talk about your condition. And when that happened, I thought, well, yeah, I probably obsess about this too much. I realized my entire day was spent thinking about my health, symptom scanning my body, worrying about what would happen. I mean, I was scared. I couldn't wear earrings. I was like reacting to the world. I couldn't eat cauliflower, It was like I was scared. And so I had crazy histamine issues. My whole face would get red and my ears would get red. And it was like, how do you not see this stuff happening? And I had heavy depression. And they said, you have to think greater than you feel right now. And so the limbic system is like a spotlight. Whatever you put it on, it grows. In the brain, it grows and overdevelops. So here's an example. One of the ladies who I learned from, she got sick from she had multiple chemical sensitivity. So I was sensitive to chemicals too. She had moved into an office, and on the backside of that office wall was a chemical. They were housing chemicals. She didn't know. And over the course of a couple years, she started to get sicker and sicker and sicker. She then figured out it was chemicals. She then started researching, right? And she realized, oh my gosh, these chemicals are so dangerous. This is so bad. So then she started to get hypervigilant, right? Walking into houses, is there a candle? Do they have Febreze? What is going on in here? And then she started learning about foods, and she started getting food intolerances. And then she was worried about different foods, and you can't have this and you can't have that. And she started to become hypervigilant. They do brain scans. So there are some people that have multiple chemical sensitivity where if they walk in the door of a department store and there is detergent on the other side of the store, they will have a convulsion just from being that far away from it.
Mm.
So what happened to that person? How are they reacting to inert substance that far away? When they do brain scans of these babes who are so hyperreactive to chemical, the part of the brain that is associated with smell has overdeveloped. Over years or a short period of time of them being hypervigilant and thinking, so the limbic system, whatever it focuses on, it grows. So one of the things with limbic system impairment is we overdevelop parts of our brain associated with our conditions that we have, right? So in the beginning, to nip those neural networks of these overdeveloped parts, you have to take the limbic system and start flashing it on other things. Your life, joy, what makes you happy. Talking about your health, not symptom scanning. So that's part of it. Then part of the practice is you sit in an elevated state for 60 minutes a day, 40 to 60 minutes a day. In that state, you teach your brain to release dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. Those are feel-good chemicals, but they're also anti-inflammatory. They can help unflip genes for chronic illness that have flipped. In that period of 40 to 60 minutes, you're teaching the neocortex to hold down. So many people with chronic illness know that they are very sensitive to things. And for me, I just thought I don't have a lot of bandwidth. I've been super sensitive my whole life. I thought I was an HSP, a highly sensitive person. I learned about HSPs. I learned about, what is the word? An empath. I don't even call myself empath anymore.
Mhm.
So I was like, I'm an empath and and the more I learned about it, the more the sensitivity overgrew in me. The more the empath stuff of me taking on other people's emotions, I just thought that that's who Courtney was. I had no idea that that was limbic system impairment. If you think of a situation, let's think of a house that's going to burn down, right? Well, this is like of trauma. So I also had a ton of past trauma, and trauma is anything from big things or little things. I had a bunch of small t trauma, and I did like 20 years of trauma work and therapy and workshops, and I taught trauma release and did all of these things helping clients process trauma. And on my own, it felt like an onion. It was like another layer, another layer. It was like, okay, and I was never like thriving, but because I was doing the work, I felt like I was making progress. And at the time, they told me I couldn't do trauma work. And I was working with this guy, and I had a past eating disorder, which was part of limbic system impairment. But I had found a way to process my emotions, and I would cry and journal. And I said to him, I said, they said for 6 months, I shouldn't do trauma work and I'm scared. This is how I cope now, you know? And he said, listen, what do you have to lose? Just do it. And then in 6 months, come back. We'll finish the work that we're doing. And I thought, okay. Um, so I stopped because, I stopped. Here's the cool thing. I never had to go back. I literally never had to go back.
Mm.
So these traumas in my brain. So here's what I'm going to explain. The house that's on fire where I was starting. Let's say two people are upstairs in a bedroom and a house catches on fire and the door slams shut and they have to like really wrestle to get out. And it's scary, right? There's smoke. The house is burning down. They rush out and they make it out of the house. Two people, same trauma situation. One ends up with complex PTSD and the other doesn't. What happened? It's typically the brain that has limbic system impairment or is stuck in a state of fight or flight, can't process that situation. So my brain was unable to, all of the small T traumas that happened to me, I can now think of without a physical response happening to it because my brain is online, my neocortex is online. Now that was a side benefit that I didn't even know could happen. Wasn't even trying to happen. I was just trying to get rid of the seasonal depression. And then I really wanted to go after the food intolerances. After they told me I could get my food intolerances back because I couldn't figure out, I just sort of thought remission was better, right? I didn't realize I could. I mean, I have a full cabinet of supplements now. I can eat anything but gluten or eggs, which is a miracle to me.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah, so that's some more of how it helped.
Mm. Yeah. That, what was it? I can't remember the name. You said the thing that you spend 60 minutes every day, kind of like in a positive frame of mind. What did you call that?
Yeah, so it's a limbic practice that
Mhm.
is spent 60 minutes of the day. It is you sit in an elevated state, and it's a practice where you teach your brain to release the dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. You're also teaching the brain to sit still. In this period of time, it's happened for me, and I see this. I've not seen this not work for anybody in that their whole life lights up. The amount of joy that comes is unbelievable. And some people say to me, this sounds almost too good to be true. Does this not work for some people? And I say, yep, it doesn't work for a lot of people. And they like look at me and I say, because they don't do it. They don't do it. They
Mm.
hear it and they learn about it, but they don't actually apply it. And when you apply it, your whole life changes. So your whole life changes and your body can get to remission. So these anti-inflammatory cascade of chemicals start coming down. Your body actually starts to get into a state where it can detox, where it can heal and repair, where you are entering the parasympathetic for the first time, often in a long time.
Mm.
So I would work with my limbic coach and she would say, well, when you kick into adrenaline. And I didn't know what that meant because, like, I would be calm and then I would be revved, calm and revved. And then it wasn't until I started doing limbic work that I kicked out of adrenaline one day. And then I kicked back in and I thought, oh my gosh, like, I'm actually never getting calm. I didn't know it. I didn't know that, like, my base level, what I thought was calm was
Mm.
still revved. And it wasn't
Mm.
until I could get my brain out of fight or flight that I dropped down. And I was like, wow, like how many years have I been like that? Um, when you talk about gut healing specifically, so it's not just the limbic work or the 1 hour practice. There are practices that you do throughout the day to reframe the mind, focus on different things, step away from the story of chronic illness. So there are practices that you do all day. And then once you do top down, so getting the brain out of fight or flight, you then work body up. So some limbic programs only work body up, somatic, and some only work top down, brain down. We do both. And there's something called cell danger response. Our cells and our mind have coded in them these stories, and our brain, from traumatic experiences or fear, our body can actually be in fear or fight or flight, and we don't know why. And so we do somatic practices to get the body out of fight or flight. When you're talking about gut health specifically, you think the gastrointestinal tract is a tract, right? And inside there's villi,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a beautiful coral reef. On top of the villi are these things called enterovites. They have little hairs. That's what houses a healthy microbiome, is all of these villi and enterovites. When we have chronic illness, they're typically like nubs, right?
Mm.
And so I had been on a gut healing protocol, doing the right diet, but my villi couldn't actually grow back because my ecosystem was still such a mess from the stress chemicals.
Mm.
So just by getting my body out of the stress, my diet was able to do what it needed to do, because prior to that, my efforts were almost to no avail. Well, no, half. I mean, I healed, but I wasn't recovering all of the way.
Mm.
And typically, if somebody is stuck in their healing journey, there's something else going on. And limbic work for many people is the last piece of the puzzle that
Mm.
gets their body the rest of the way, because it's typically something they hear about further along in the journey.
Mm.
And what I want to say is limbic work was the thing that took my body the rest of the way. But typically, when people work with multiple practitioners over the course of years, they eventually run across a supplement or a thing, and they say, oh, it was this supplement. It was limbic system impairment. This is what fixed me, right? Well, not really. It was the 100 other things you had
Yeah.
done. And then that was your puzzle piece that made everything else come together.
Mm.
But it's a huge puzzle piece. That can help with dysautonomia, that helps with autoimmune conditions. SIRS and mold is known to have a ton of limbic system impairment, just as the mold can really affect the brain. Your gastrointestinal issues, if there is, so like Gabor Mate talks about trauma causing chronic illness. Well, when he talks about it in his books, it's like this concept, right? Trauma is linked to people with chronic illness. Well, limbic system impairment is the medical reasons why that happens, right? It's not because you had a traumatic experience happen to you that now you're more likely to have autoimmune disease or gastrointestinal issues. It is that it has put your brain in a state of fight or flight, which
Mm.
now for years has led your body to be susceptible. So like some people who are vaccine injured or have had severe reactions to viruses that their body should have been able to handle. And like mine, the mold exposure. Had I not had limbic system impairment, that limbic system impairment was just weakening my system. I was on high alert. So I was in a fragile state, but I had no idea. I was an athlete. I was young. So then when that mold came in, or when somebody's vaccine comes in, or virus or whatever goes on, and sometimes they don't know what the thing is. When there's limbic system impairment, what I believe it does is all of that chronic stress has weakened the system.
Mm.
So like that's the tipping point. So I believe limbic system impairment was at the root of everything, because my body was at a weaker state when I was exposed to the things.
Mm. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that's often called allostatic load, isn't it? It's like your body can cope with so much, but when it gets to a point, there's a breaking point, the straw breaks the camel's back, so to speak, at some point. It makes complete sense. And, what you were saying was, when someone finally gets resolution to their problem, and they might think, oh, it was this supplement or it was this diet or whatever. Well, yeah, they were part of it, but it was everything else that you did as well. And when you were saying that, it reminds me. So I work a lot with people with skin issues, particularly acne.
Okay.
And it's amazing how many people I hear say, oh, I tried that. It didn't work. Right. And it's like, if you do one thing, it's almost definitely not going to work. Right. And I know, working with lots of different conditions, but particularly with skin issues as well, there's a process, and you've got to go through a number of things, and for some people, they can change their diet and their skin gets better. Right. But for some people, they might have to do a lot of other things, right, before they get better. But they had to do all of those things. There wasn't one of those things that, got them back to health. It was all of the things. So that completely, I completely agree with that. What would you say? I know you've mentioned all of your symptoms, and there was a lot of them. What would you say are perhaps some of the more common symptoms when someone has limbic system impairment?
Yeah. Something else that I want to say before I answer that is you said, I want to respond to when they said, oh, I've tried that before.
Mm.
So what happened with my limbic work is much of the stuff that got my body the rest of the way to remission was supplements and healing strategies that I had implemented years before and could not tolerate.
Mm.
And so I had a story that those things didn't work, but my body wasn't in a place where they could actually work. And so for people to be open-minded with exactly what you said, that when there's a whole thing going on, some of the things that could have possibly actually been harmful in the past can be beneficial. I'm not suggesting anybody go do something that harmed them, but to be open-minded that just because a certain supplement did something in the past, it doesn't mean that when the body is more robust that actually can't be a true healing agent. So I think we become really rigid when we get scared and have chronic illness. At least I know I did. I was scared of so many things and scared of the symptoms that I was very closed-minded to anything that was like anything that had hurt me. And it was actually me becoming open-minded to those things again and getting my body to a more stable place that I was able to flourish using those practices or foods or supplements or detox protocols. So I agree with you 100%.
That actually reminds me of a client I've worked with for a number of years on and off. And I remember she had a quite severe reaction to ashwagandha, right? And I was quite surprised. I thought, wow, I've never heard of anyone having a reaction to it. Of course, anyone can react to anything, right? And as you were speaking then, I was kind of thinking, I wonder if that is one of those situations you're talking about that, perhaps if she has that condition and she deals with it at some point in the future, maybe she could go back to using ashwagandha, maybe,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For myself, I had taken St. John's wort in the past and had what I would call violent reaction to it. And then as I started limbic system work, they brought that herb back in because I didn't want to have seasonal depression that year. I didn't have seasonal depression that year, and I have not had it since. St. John's wort is very calming for the gut lining, the nervous system and the gut lining. It helps us, with serotonin. It is a wonderful healing herb for certain people. I'm not suggesting everybody go take this, especially it's not appropriate if you're on an SSRI. But all I wanted to say with that is I had a violent response to an herb. And years later, it was one of the most powerful, soothing, healing things that helped me pull out of a really dark hole. So yeah, that's true. So your question about limbic system impairment, remind me.
Yeah. So what are some of the more sort of common symptoms that people experience? Did you know that 92% of people fail to follow through on their New Year's resolutions? That's right. Year after year, most of us start strong and then lose momentum by February. Sound familiar? But what if this year could be different? What if you finally had the tools to make your goals stick? Introducing Stickability, a simple, effective, and affordable program designed to help you overcome the cycle of failed resolutions. In just a short time, you'll learn how to create lasting habits without wasting hours or breaking the bank. This isn't just another plan. It's the solution to finally sticking to your healthy lifestyle goals. Don't let this year be like the last. Head over to stickabilitycourse.com now to enroll. It's affordable, easy to follow, and packed with tools to make 2025 the year that you have the ability to make it stick.
Absolutely. Mold toxicity, Lyme, multiple chemical sensitivity. So if you start getting sensitive to food intolerances, is a huge issue with limbic system impairment. SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, is huge. Dysautonomia, anything under that blanket, POTS, pandas, the nervous system conditions are very linked to nervous system work. Autoimmunity is a huge piece of it. Joint pain, a big sign, telltale sign, is light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, hypervigilance. If somebody is the person, like if there's a loud sound and they're the one that jumps, that's the brain's in fight or flight. Depression, anxiety, ADD, ADHD are all symptoms of it. Bloating, regular GI stuff. Because if the brain is in fight or flight, it is 100% affecting the gastrointestinal tract. And 9 times out of 10, sometimes I can just see the client on the camera and they're like, I have this thing. And I say, like, are you in fight or flight? They're like, no way. And I'm like, okay, like they're so scared. I can see it. But 9 times out of 10, when somebody has it and they start hearing this, they're like, that's me. They just know. They know. And so for me, it was a relief because when they started saying this, I was like, yeah, for sure. If somebody's reacting to EMF, so at the end, I started reacting to EMF. And when I started not being able to wear earrings and reacting to the EMF, I had a stationary bike and it had a Bluetooth, and I would get on the bike and my whole nervous system would be like, meh. And I was like, that bike is, I'm not okay after I get on that bike. And then I started getting that when I started reacting to the world, I was like, this is scary, but not everybody makes it that far. Right. But if you are reacting to, inert substances, things in your environment, it's often limbic system impairment is a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just thinking in terms of, let's say someone is listening or watching this and they're thinking, that's me, right? And it's interesting when you were speaking, I'm thinking of certain people that I know and I'm thinking, yeah, that's probably them. That's probably them. And I think if they listen to this, they'd probably go, yeah, it is me as well. So say for instance, someone contacts you and they say, look, I heard you on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. What's the process like? What does the process look like for someone that was, we're going to come and see you? I guess, you can do remote sessions as well online.
Yeah. So when people come to see me, they either come for nutrition and limbic work, or they come straight for limbic work. How it works is you come with an intake and then we go through your health history. And then basically when you start limbic work, your whole world is going to change. A lot of times marriages have been impacted from chronic illness because the chronic illness becomes this thing in between, right? Because they're talking about it. It can affect families. Many people have lost their joy. They are just sort of lost in the chronic health. So we do the intake and then we start moving them back into their life. They go through a set of modules that teaches them all about top-down limbic work, about how to get their brain out of fight or flight, how to change their thought patterns, how to start interacting with family. They have a conversation with their family. Hey, we just started working with Final Key. And so my company name is Final Key. And what that is you are your final key. Like it's never a practitioner or a book or a supplement or a product.
Mm-hmm.
It is you learning the right tools and implementing them. So you're your final key
Mm.
and you have a conversation with your family. Hey, I have this whole new thing and we're no longer going to talk about my health symptoms. And typically the family is totally on board because they're tired, right? And, yeah, they go through modules where they learn about top down and they start the practices. And then once the brain is out of fight or flight, we start learning the somatic practices and getting the vagus nerve online. So our vagus nerve is our longest nerve in the body. It affects our ability to get into the parasympathetic. And then we start working on, let's say there's medical appointments that cause stress or trauma, or a family member that causes stress or trauma. How do we teach? We do incremental training. So we teach the body. So like, let's say mother-in-law is a major stressor and you end up after we teach the body how to be calm on the other side of mother-in-law's visit or the doctor's visit. And then what happens is we start working on certain stressful situations, teaching the limbic system how to stay calm on either side. What you're doing is starting to build the muscle of the limbic system. So the goal isn't to just be in the parasympathetic, right? It's not that no situation stresses us any longer. It's that when you are in limbic system impairment, the brain doesn't know how to kick out of fight or flight. And what a healthy limbic system, what a healthy nervous system does is it can kick from the parasympathetic to fight or flight, back and forth. And that's what we want. We want it to be able to kick out. The reason why they had told me I can't do trauma work at that time is because my brain was stuck over here in fight or flight. So a healthy person can go into a therapy session or go into a trauma session and process that and then drive home. And they just sort of process it. And then by the evening, their brain probably has kicked out of it. When you have limbic system impairment, you are so far this way that any trauma, any stress, including reading about symptoms that a supplement could have, it keeps it stuck over here. And so for a period of time, we have to teach it to go over here to the calm and safety. And then we work on teaching it to be robust because we want a robust limbic system.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It reminds me as well, again, someone I know, and it's something that I've been very aware of over a number of years. But every time you're with them, they mention their condition probably every 10 minutes. And it will be, oh, because I've got this. It's like an excuse. And I just think you're not doing yourself any good. You're constantly reminding yourself of this issue that you've got. Yeah, it's an issue and it's a serious issue. But you're not doing yourself any favors constantly reminding yourself of it, And it's not my place to say that, but it does make me feel quite sad for that person that their life almost revolves around it, And all you're doing is you're just perpetuating the problem.
Perpetuating, strengthening neural networks, like not just a story of you carrying this story around is negative. The more you talk about it, the more you think about it, that you are building a neural network, strengthening that. So the brain is just used to going down there and you're literally creating a trap for yourself in a medical way. It's not just like, oh, the story doesn't feel good to you. The repeated patterns of it. And here's the thing. Oh, that is so wonderful about limbic work. Anything about you that you do not like right now is not you. That could be how you respond to stimuli. That could be a preference that you have. That could be anything about you that is not working. You can change. The brain is an organ that is meant to be rewired. It can't not but rewire itself. And so when I was going through limbic work, my company colors are blue. And I chose them because growing up, I grew up in a house where my mom said, I hate blue. I hate the color blue. people decorate in kitchens in blue, and I hate blue, blue, blue. So I hated blue. I disliked the color blue. I did not like blue clothes. I didn't like blue decorations. I didn't like blue cars. I didn't like blue. And that was just Courtney, right? It's just like a preference. It's who I am. I don't like blue. And so I in my limbic training, I started visualizing this beautiful bedspread with purple and blue flowers. And I would see it and I would say, oh, I love the blue. And my brain would say, no, I don't. Right. And I did it for 6 months. And I was just doing it as like a joke, kind of, just to see what was possible. And then one day I was walking through a store and I saw a blue shirt and my mind said, I like that shirt. And I was like, whoa, really? And so blue's one of my favorite colors now. And it didn't happen by me saying, oh, I like blue. Because when I said that initially, my brain said, no, I don't. Like it was who I was. It was repeated pattern behavior. But with new repeated patterned action, you can wire in new neural networks where now I prefer blue. And that means anything about you that you don't like is possible to change. Like that's when I really grasped all things are possible. We are not stuck. Our brain is not fixed. Um, so while limbic system impairment helps the body get to remission, we also work with your marriage. Possibly you've shut down your sexuality. Possibly you're not in a job that brings you joy. Possibly, and we start building new neural networks and bringing the brain back alive. And I see people's whole lives light up. And then when we start walking you back towards joy and your marriage is doing well, or you move into a job that you like, or you start looking for work because you've not been working because your chronic illness, that all contributes to well health, is stepping back into who you are. And a lot of that is getting the body out of fight or flight so that you can actually self-actualize all of the things. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom rung is health, shelter, safety. So when you are stuck in fear of your health, you are stuck in the bottom rung. You actually can't fully self-actualize. I'm not suggesting that nobody can, but it's got to be blocking you on some level. So when you create safety here and you meet all of the needs here, even before you fully hit remission, right? You meet all of these needs. I watch people's whole lives light up. And that's what happened for me too. So I would have said I'm somebody who doesn't have a lot of bandwidth. I have a lot of bandwidth now. Uh, I have wired in a state of positivity. Now, I used to wake up in the morning and my brain had doom and fear. I wake up in the morning and my brain says, good morning, beautiful. Now, I have not surpassed the human experience. I still experience hurt and pain and stuff, but it's not as engulfing. And when it comes, I can hold it and it moves through me. Instead of being this heavy, lingering, I feel like a normal human that can process things appropriately. I feel less fragile. And then a really, really, really the most wonderful thing. Well, I don't know how to say wonderful because I couldn't eat food before. Uh, so like being able to function and my body is healthy and strong. I just hiked the Grand Canyon. If anybody knows what that is, I went rim to rim to rim to rim. I did 42 miles of one of the hardest hikes in the United States in 36 hours. So my body is strong and can move again. The fatigue is a thing of the past for me. So all of those things are a miracle. The biggest miracle is through childhood stress, I did not have a good relationship with my mom, in that it was hard for me to be in the same room as her. I was constantly triggered. I did an insane amount of therapy and different techniques trying to heal that relationship. I can be around my mama now. I took her to Iceland to see the Northern Lights, and like we got to live her bucket list thing. And I like stood there and experienced this with her, and just like the overwhelming gratitude I had for my healing journey, because had I never accidentally got exposed to limbic work, I don't think I would have been able to share this beautiful experience with my mom. I don't
Mm.
think I would be able to share these years with her. And here's the thing, my mom didn't change. My limbic system, my brain can handle being around her. And it's not that I conceptually change things. It's my nervous system is different. And so, um, yeah, I mean, that in of itself is priceless.
Mm. Yeah. How long have you been doing limbic work?
5 years.
Okay.
It takes between 6 months and 3 years for somebody to fully rewire their limbic system.
Mm.
Typically say 6 months to get buy-in. Now I see a lot of people come in and they get, within 6 weeks, people notice a difference. They notice sensitivities are coming down, their emotional state is changing. So it creates buy-in, which is great. And then you need a longer period of time. So I've had a handful of people that come in 3 months and they're like, I'm great. I can drive the car now. I can leave the house. I feel great. And then they disappear and they come back a year later and they're not well. And what happened is the brain will kick out and people will start getting symptom relief, but it's not actually fully rewired yet. It's like a new babe, right? It takes time and tons of repetition to strengthen all those new neural networks to actually fully get the body into remission.
Mm.
So it's a process that takes time, but it is so worth it.
Mm. Yeah, no, I was just interested in, obviously the last 5 years has been, well, planet fear, hasn't it? One thing after another, all these invisible global disasters, right? That they keep making up that everyone has to be scared of. And sadly, there are a lot of people that fall for all these propaganda campaigns, whether it's the climate scam or the next germ that has never been found that's going to kill us all. Or, right now as we speak, the UK is bombing Russia at the moment, you know, so the threat of World War III, whatever. I was just curious as to, whether, and I guess if you've only been doing it 5 years, you won't really have seen the difference.
Mhm.
But whether there's a difference in terms of, I would imagine there's a lot more people in the world today that actually need limbic work compared to 5, 6 years ago.
Um, I 100% agree with you. Um, and I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Number one, I felt really bad saying this during 2020. So during COVID, I was maybe a year or a year and a half into limbic work. Um, I watched everybody around me melt down, and 2020 was one of the best years of my life. And I kept, like, I would feel bad to say that to somebody, right? And it was just that my nervous system was able to stay stable during a lot of chaos. Um, I do notice more very predominant limbic system impairment. I think part of that is constant media and propaganda.
Mm.
And when I mean constant, let's say 20 years ago, we would sit in front of our television until 9 p.m., right? Or people would. I don't own a TV here, but, and then they would go to bed and they would go to work. It is now on our phones coming in at us all day, constant. Like the amount of stimulation and stress that's coming in, and not even stress. When you think of a TikTok, if you think of 60 seconds of a TikTok video, the bits and music and talking and all of the things, there's more bits of information for somebody to process in 60 seconds than they would see in a field over 60 minutes, right? Uh, just out in nature. And so there's so much stimulation, text messages, emails, and then much of it is stress and fear and propaganda and the world is going to end and you're going to get so sick from this next virus. So that's part of it. I also think our world is becoming increasingly toxic. And I don't say that in a fear way. So I used to have food fear as I was healing. I had such fear if I ate something that was off. So I'm not saying this to create fear, but it is a reality that more toxins are in our food, more toxins are in our environment. So the body's exposed to a heavier load of stuff. We have electromagnetic fields that are putting stressors on the body. Um, so I think our environment is getting more toxic. Our microbiomes are not as robust as they used to be, so they can protect us from less. And then the constant stressors. So when you start limbic work, you take yourself away from all of those stressors so that the brain can actually heal. And what happens is the first week or so, I was overwhelmed when I stopped because I thought, I don't even know what to think about. Like, I didn't even know what to think of. Like, my brain only knew how to stress about health or something.
Mm,
And then I had to reteach the brain how to think of daily life and spirituality and my friends and my relationships and my career and being peaceful or gardening or so I think it's a combination of all of the things happening that is exacerbating this limbic system impairment. But I see it getting worse and more people having it.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I know in the UK, the largest or the most common cause of death for males under the age of 45 is suicide, right? Which again, I would imagine has got something to do with what we're discussing today, right?
Yeah.
I first met Amelia at a health club where I was hosting an event offering back screenings to the members. The first thing I noticed about Amelia was a dullness in her eyes, which I later realized was due to extreme pain, and I noticed that she was unable to turn her head and had to turn her whole body if she wanted to look in a different direction. Amelia informed me that she had a history of repeated shoulder and neck pain for the last 2 years and was diagnosed with spinal stenosis at C45, C56, and C67, and a stenosis is a blockage which in Amelia's case was in the spinal canal of her neck, irritating her spinal cord. She had extreme tenderness over her neck and trapezius muscles on both sides, and she suffered from severe neck pain continuously. Amelia informed me that she'd been advised that spinal surgery was the only option, but the surgery came with great risks, including potential paralysis, and no guarantee of success, which made Amelia fearful of the surgery. In addition to this, Amelia suffered from continuous exhaustion, painful intestinal gas and bloating, even though she felt she was following a healthy diet. After a thorough evaluation, I designed Amelia a corrective exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle plan, plus I referred her to a Nuka chiropractor for specific adjustments to her neck. After following the plan religiously, Amelia is much stronger and much more flexible than she's ever been before, and no longer suffers from repeated neck pain and has full range of motion in her neck. Amelia also reported that her energy was maximized and that she no longer suffers from the gripping stomach pains that had dominated her life for a very long time. If you're suffering like Amelia was and you'd like to find out more about getting to the root cause of your pain, go to www.bodycheck.co.uk, that's bodychek.co.uk, to request your consultation.
I feel always careful when I say this because whenever I say things, anything I've said here is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm not prescribing anything. This is what I know from my own personal experience and from research. It is my understanding that all mental health conditions, symptoms, are symptoms of the body, meaning depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia is a symptom of the body, much like acne, which you're talking about, or a headache. I had anxiety. I had panic attack disorder. I had depression. I was diagnosed with severe depression. And I had 2 different psychiatrists tell me I was bipolar. They offered me a host of medications. They told me my brain did not make the right neurotransmitters, that I had chemical imbalances in my brain. None of those drugs helped me flourish. They often cause side effects. And then I would be given another one to try to mitigate that side effect. through a long period of my illness and before, mostly during my illness, I would pray to God at night not to wake up. Like, I just didn't want to do it again. And um, that was really real in waves for a lot of years. And what I think is the most sad for me about hearing what you just said about the suicide is that is literally a product of their body not being well.
Mm.
Because once my body came into balance, I don't have any of those mental health conditions that I was told would be lifelong. I laid in bed for years not wanting to wake up in the morning, and that didn't have to be the case. So if you talk about gut health, 80 to 90% of our neurotransmitters are made in our gut. If your gut's a mess, of course your brain's not working.
Mm.
You're in fight or flight and you have omega-3 6 fatty acid imbalance and you have inflammatory foods coming in. And if you have a leaky gut and foods are getting out into your bloodstream, you have systemic inflammation. If you're waking up with stiff and achy muscles in the morning, you have systemic inflammation. That means your brain's inflamed.
Mm.
Literally can't work right. But I've had schizophrenic clients who the refrigerator's talking to them, right? We bring their body into the balance. The refrigerator stops talking. And so what makes me sad is those suicides are preventable. That's preventable.
Mm. Yeah. 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 It's interesting as well. Dr. Bradley Nelson, who developed the emotion code, he suggests that 80, 90% of all illness is emotional in nature or causative emotionally. I know Bill Walcott, who wrote the Metabolic Typing Diet, he suggests that with cancers, because he works with people with cancer quite extensively back in the 60s and 70s, he told me once that, he believes that all cancers have an emotional component. And interestingly, another guest has been on the show a couple of times, Paul Lindertz, he suggests that every cancer is actually causative from an emotional or trauma, right? So it's quite interesting that there's a lot of people that kind of suggest that there's a very strong causative effect of emotions or trauma or the lack of being able to react in the right way from trauma that can go on to cause almost any kind of disease. So, to me, it sounds like the work that you're doing, is very much needed in the world today.
Yeah, thank you. It is a very strong road to Rome. What I invite people to do is, I always say, have a red flag out. If you hear any practitioner or any modality say, this is the way.
Mm.
Without this, you won't recover, or this is what you have to do. Because I don't think that's the case. What I know is if you have limbic system impairment, it would be advantageous to get the brain out of fight or flight.
Mm.
I have a road to Rome that works for a lot of people. And I think the most important part is I read this book called How Healing Works. And nobody has to read it, but it was a great book. And they did research. What they were researching is allopathy, homeopathy, acupuncture, 5 different types of treatment. And they would take the same condition, let's say a bum knee or a heart condition or whatever. And it was actually only like 15 to 20% about the actual modality. The most large factor, whether that worked or not, is if you believed in your practitioner,
Uh-huh.
believed it, and if they believed in you.
Mm.
That affected the course of treatment working more than anything else. So we know placebo works. And what I'm not saying that limbic work is placebo. What I'm saying is there will be a subset of people that hear what I'm saying, just like I heard it, and they are like, that's me. That's me. And then when you go down this road, there's 100% chance your needle will move, right? And if it's not in alignment, you may hear some of this and think, okay, but maybe this is a piece to my puzzle. And I want us to all find places and homes that feel right, that
Mm.
resonate right, because I see the most amount of healing and recovery when we land at a place for healing that feels right. So if you're with a practitioner that you're like it's not fully in alignment, I would have you find somebody that feels right to your soul, because I think that impacts our healing process. No,
Mm.
I know it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So what would you say to someone if they were a bit skeptical or hesitant about trying limbic system training?
Yeah, great question. Um, if they were a bit skeptical, one, if you wanted to reach out, I can have you talk to any of the people that have been through it because they are rave reviewers. But if you would be open-minded and think of it the way I thought of it is, I was the person that said, I've already tried everything, right? It can't hurt.
Mm.
It literally cannot hurt you. It can only make everything better. And it can get you to a place where you can actually take on some of the other stuff. So to just be open-minded and think, what do I have to lose? I literally have nothing to lose. My mood can go up. My quality of life can go up. And I can actually, typically, if somebody's listening to your show, they probably know, I'm going to assume your listeners listen to a lot of your stuff and are very educated. They know that the body has an innate capacity to heal.
Mm.
All we're going to do with limbic work is get your body to a place that it can actually do that, right? Because limbic system impairment will block the innate ability to heal or to detox. So, yeah, I would say it's 100% worth just trying.
Mm. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So what's next for you, Courtney?
What's next for me? Well, I feel so blessed in that when I started my practice, when you change somebody's life, they tell, like when you reverse their ulcerative, no, when you have tools that helps them reverse their ulcerative colitis, or if they have alopecia and they haven't had hair in 20 years and their hair starts growing, or their rheumatoid arthritis, they were bedbound and now they can walk the dog, or if you have somebody with dysautonomia who's been bedbound for 2 years and they're now taking their kid to the park, they tell everybody they know. And so my practice got very, very big and I was bogged down with hours. And so some of the people that I helped to recover have been to school and I'm training them so that we can, I already have 3 of them that are already working so that we can help impact more people.
Mm.
Now we're just getting the message out about limbic system impairment because it's not super readily available. Once you hear about it, you can find it. But for me, it took me 6 years down the road till I even heard about it. And if I'm totally honest, when I was very first sick, somebody had said to me, hey, I heard in this practice, and if you do this an hour a day, I think it could help you. And I thought, no way. Like, I'm going to find a doctor and there's a pill and I'm going to get better. And then like 6, 8 years later, you're like, okay, I'll try it. I'm down to try anything. And so now it's to get the word out about limbic system impairment and help more
Mm.
bodies come to remission with a whole concept. Because I think what happens is they either go to a nutritionist or a limbic practitioner and they don't have somebody looking at their whole picture.
Mm.
So that's what we like to offer.
Yeah. Great. Great. And where can people find you online?
Yeah. So they can find me at the website at finalkeywellness.com. They can email me at Courtney@finalkeywellness.com. And the Instagram is at finalkeywellness.com. The Instagram isn't just based on limbic work, but there's a lot of limbic information at the website.
Awesome. Great stuff. Courtney, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation and, thanks so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom today.
Yeah, thank you for having me and thank you for all the good you're spreading in the world. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's all from Courtney and me for this week. But don't forget to join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.